everyone, Alec Elcher the SideQuest Gamer here. How many Zelda fans does it take to screw in a light bulb? Oh wait, I told a variation of that joke in past videos. Anyways, the Zelda fanbase... First off, I would like to address that in my previous two videos, I may have been a little harsh saying that the Sonic and Pokemon fanbases in general suck. Which in retrospect was short-sighted on my part, as it's only a few bad apples that suck. I do think that some fan bases in general have more village idiots than others, but even then, they're just an extremely vocal minority. Now, I will say that the majority of the fan base does hold these biases to a degree, but most of them are polite about these biases. The videos were more targeted towards the biases created by the fans of those franchises rather than the people themselves. And that should have been my only mission from the start, because while I don't regret making those videos, I would change a few things if I were to go back and remake them. And I'm honestly surprised that the commentary community did not go after those videos, as in some parts, mainly where I talk in the nasally mocking tone. That was very unnecessary on my part, and I apologize to those who were offended. But anyways, without further ado, let's get to the focus of this rant or editorial. The Legend of Zelda. There's no denying that it's a rich video game franchise with so many great installments in the series. Ocarina of Time, Wind Waker, A Link to the Past, Majora's Mask, there's just so many to list. I'm a huge fan of the series. I may not care for the timeline, as I felt each game was so self-contained that you could even pick up and play a sequel without any previous established continuity obligating you to play the predecessor. But the fanbase in general, they do have their biases, like every fanbase. Now there's nothing wrong with liking an entry more than another entry, but there is something wrong with disliking an entry for nitpicky reasons. At least in my definition of wrong. Let's go through the series from the beginning. The first Zelda on the NES gave us a non-linear game where the focus is on exploration and giving us the freedom of choice. Its story was basic, but provided enough exposition to get the game started. While I personally found the game too open-ended to the point where you'd best have a guide with you, I did enjoy the game for what it was. Nothing I would go back and replay every year, but it wasn't too bad for a first entry. I will admit it has aged quite a bit, but I still found some enjoyment out of it. Zelda II. Now this game does get some hate because if you've watched any review of it on the internet, it drastically changed the gameplay from the first game in favor of more action-oriented side-scrolling sections. I'll be honest, it was hard, but not much harder than the first in my opinion. Newer Zelda fans are generally the ones who think Zelda 2 is garbage, but I've only heard one internet reviewer who grew up in the 80s call it a bad Zelda sequel. But most people who grew up in the 80s were either indifferent to it or liked it for what it was. I, who grew up in the 2000s, personally think it's decent. Again, it has aged quite a bit, but I think Zelda fans focus way too much on what it isn't, when they should be focusing on what it is. And for what it is, I actually think it's a pretty good sequel. There are reasons why to dislike this game that aren't as nitpicky. Instead of saying it sucks because it's not like the first Zelda, you could instead criticize the difficulty curve, most notably in Death Mountain. You could also criticize how it's more linear, or even mention why you like or dislike the combat system. You could even criticize the side-scrolling sections if you had legitimate problems with it. But don't criticize the side-scrolling sections just because they exist. Saying a game sucks for being different, while I understand unmet expectations, I wouldn't call it a fair analysis of the game. But believe it or not, there are actually two people I know who prefer the second Zelda over the first. Now as for A Link to the Past, what can I say? It's my personal favorite in the series, and I plan on looking at that game in my 90th review. But anyways, Zelda fans consider it either to be the best in the series or one of the best. I did meet a few who didn't like it as much as later installments, and I guess it's not for everyone, but I've come across a comment on a review of A Link Between Worlds, the 3DS game that was pretty much reimagining of A Link to the Past. This person said, "Come on guys, if you take off the nostalgia goggles, you would clearly see that this game is superior, and that's a fact." Sorry buddy. H2O being the chemical formula for water is a scientifically proven fact. Whether you like A Link Between Worlds more is an opinion, not fact, an opinion. And the replies of that comment are met with equally disturbing Link to the Past defenders arguing about how A Link to the Past is the best Zelda, period. And sorry guys, but that is also an opinion. I don't mind different opinions, but saying your opinion is fact and trying to force it down other people's throats is rather arrogant. In fact, it invalidates any meaning your opinion had in the first place. Of course, this person is part of the 5% of Zelda fans that are obnoxious with their opinions. It gets worse, as A Link to the Past is considered to be the pinnacle of the 2D Zelda games. Yes, there were the Game Boy sequels, which I thought were good for what they were, but A Link to the Past has pretty much established the formula for all future Zelda games, where all of them had to have 3 practice dungeons, a Master Sword, then 6 to 9 more dungeons, final boss, save Zelda, and pieces restored in Hyrule. Well, except for the Game Boy Zeldas and Majora's Mask, but you get what I mean. But the reason why I say it gets worse is the introduction of the 3D Zelda games. Ocarina of Time brought the series into 3D, and it was a pretty good game. Now, newer Zelda fans call it overrated ever since YouTuber EgoRaptor made his sequelitis video on it, criticizing many aspects of Ocarina of Time, which isn't entirely unwarranted, but EgoRaptor has so many fans that will recite his words like a bunch of cultists. But calling Ocarina of Time overrated, is that really a fair assessment? Now, there are plenty of reasons why to dislike this game, as some people can't get into it. That's perfectly fine. Ocarina of Time is noticeably more story-driven than A Link to the Past, and I get that can put some people off. But to say something is overrated is like saying, how dare you have fun with Ocarina of Time more than I did? How dare you find Ocarina of Time the best in the series? How dare you like it, period? This game is constantly called overrated so much it's not even overrated anymore. If anything, I would say it's over-criticized. Is it my favorite Zelda game? No, it's not perfect. It was my first, but as I've grown up, I'm aware of its flaws, but they're just minor flaws, at least to me. I ask those who do have their reservations against Ocarina of Time, what did it do right? And focus on that. Again, if you did not find it fun, that's perfectly valid, but there's so many people who enjoy it the most, and they have every right to enjoy Ocarina of Time the most. They have every right to say it's the best in the series. Now, as for Majora's Mask, it was deemed inferior upon initial release because it only had 4 dungeons and focused more on side quests. But the new general consensus as of 2015 is that it's better than Ocarina of Time, and is probably the most popular in the series. I'm glad people can enjoy it now. I do have my reservations against the game, but it's great. What can I say? I love the 3-day time cycle and the less emphasis on story. The Legend of Zelda Wind Waker, again, it was hated initially mainly for its cartoon cel-shaded aesthetics, but now that's exactly why people love it, as now the new general consensus is that it's one of the best games in the series. Not only that, people consider it to be the last good Zelda game, as the Wind Waker gave the player freedom to explore the vast oceans, and there's like so many temples and islands to visit. It was a very immersive experience. And the best part of Wind Waker is that it has aged extremely well due to the cel-shaded aesthetics, as you can play this on the original GameCube with the downscaled resolution on your HD TV, and it'll still look fine. But let's talk about The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword and Twilight Princess. There are a percentage of those, including myself, that love Twilight Princess, but many people hated it because it was even more story-driven and a lot more linear than even Ocarina of Time. I get non-linearity makes a Zelda game feel more like an adventure, but if I'm fine with most Mario games being linear to a degree, I'm definitely fine with Zelda games being linear. It's not even that linear, even though you have to do dungeons in a certain order. Just make it function well and fun to play, and I won't regret my purchase. I only hate the intro tutorial in the beginning of Twilight Princess, as it's kind of boring to play through, but I honestly think that Zelda Twilight Princess doesn't get enough love. Why do people hate it so much? It's linear. Oh, like Zelda Link's Awakening, Majora's Mask, and Ocarina of Time? It's too story-driven. Oh, like Metal Gear Solid, which is said to be one of the best games of all time? In fact, Metal Gear Solid 3 has even longer cutscenes than Twilight Princess. I don't like the motion controls. Really? You sure like them in Metroid Prime 3 and Super Mario Galaxy? These criticisms were also made against Skyward Sword as well, and I'm not saying they're perfect games, and I'm not saying they're the best implementation of motion controls. We're all entitled to our own subjective opinions, but I'm also entitled to my right to point out the inconsistencies of some of these unelaborate opinions. Like, why would a player hate the motion controls in Twilight Princess, yet love them in Metroid Prime 3, which has even more emphasis on motion controls? In conclusion, there are many reasons why to like or dislike a Zelda game. If we all like the same things, then what's the point in having an identity? What's the point in having many TV channels on TV? What's the point in having different tastes? But to Zelda fans out there that dislike a certain entry, I ask you to at least be understanding of others' tastes and not crusade over a piece of data packaged in a piece of plastic. We're not all going to think your favorite is the best in the series, nor the most fun game in the series. To the 5% of Zelda fans that crusade over what is truly the best Zelda game, your memories may be deeply tied to it, to the point where the game is a part of your identity, but others won't always feel the same way as you do, and I ask we all be respectful and understanding of why some prefer 2D Zelda games and why others prefer the 3D Zelda games. From my observations, 2D Zelda games always focus more on the world and exploration, but combat and story can only go so far in a 2D game. 3D Zelda games, however, due to polygons rather than sprites, can tell a more cinematic story and place heavier emphasis on strategic combat. While exploration is still encouraged, it's mainly the story and intuitive combat system that is the primary focus of most 3D Zelda games. Some people just want to play a game and others want to experience a game. I am one of those who just wants to play a game, but if the story is compelling enough, like in Twilight Princess or Wind Waker, I don't mind that either. In fact, I would enjoy experiencing a game occasionally. I like both 2D and 3D Zelda games, to be honest, and I don't think one is better than the other, as there's just too many differences to even put in the same category. And that's the key word for the Zelda series in general: difference. Because let's face it, each entry is so different than one another that there really isn't even a best Zelda game in the series. The franchise never goes stale as a result because they not only introduce a new gameplay gimmick, but they also work the game around that gimmick to give the game its own identity. Even with my least favorite entries in the series being Phantom Hourglass and Spirit Tracks, even they tried something new, and I give them a lot of credit. And their gimmicks, they weren't the worst thing in the world. I do have my issues against those games, but that's for another day. Well, that's just my 2 cents on the Zelda series and Zelda fanbase in general. Thank you so much for watching, and remember to stay awesome.